Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast, the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education. The goal is to provide meaningful conversation to what is currently happening in our classrooms. Stories, pains, moments of success. We want to hear it all. Friends, welcome back to Under the Hat podcast. Super thrilled to be here. I know that a lot of you will be catching this sometime in the future, but if you are dropping in live, please, there is a chat, whether it's on Instagram, X, YouTube, all the places, right? And so feel free to drop in those questions. I am thrilled today to be here with my friend Amber Trout. She is an amazing human. She has a lot of experience in ed tech as an educator herself, I believe the elementary space, and also has experience in the instructional coaching context. I am thrilled to have you here, Amber. But first, how are you this evening?
I'm doing so great. Thank you so much for having me, Steve. I'm excited to be here. Love to be able to do this, talk with people about education. I will always be an educator at heart, and it's always something that I love to talk about. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I love hearing everyone's story, kind of where they came from, what brought them into education, and really like where are you headed? And maybe you don't have that answer, but for those that are, watching, listening, and that have not heard of Amber Trout, because we know, I see you up in social, you are there doing a lot of phenomenal work in the education space. But so for those that are, that have not heard of you, have not seen you at a conference, what have you, just a little bit of your backstory and what you've done.
Yeah, definitely. So, believe it or not, Steve, when I got into looking at careers, first in life, I didn't look into being an educator. It was not something that was on my radar. It was something that I was like, I don't know, is that really worth it? But I actually started doing a work study at a local elementary school and started just falling in love with working with first grade students doing reading tutoring. And that's where my love of education began. So I decided to switch my major from medical to education and became a teacher after that, which was crazy, right? But I taught for 11 years prior. I've actually been with the company Pear Deck Learning now for 4 years, which is crazy to even think. But I was a teacher for 11 years, a little bit of everything. Started in elementary, did 3 through 5. Fourth grade is my jam. If you're a fourth grade teacher, those kids are the greatest. Also, I was a little bit of STEM. So I did STEM computer coding and taught K through 5 computer coding with the Project Lead the Way curriculum. And also worked with our teachers, and they had like 2-to-1 technology in their classrooms, iPads, all the different things, computers, Chromebooks. And so I spent a lot of time working with teachers with flipped classrooms and STEM technology. And then I moved into an instructional coaching role where I worked at a middle school, and I was doing instructional coaching with teachers when they had a one-to-one laptop initiative. So I did a lot of exploring, how do you use tools in your classroom, flip your classroom, and be able to make it a whole lot easier to use technology within your class. And then the pandemic hit. And as an instructional coach, you're like, I'm used to going into a classroom and working with teachers. It's like, what do you do on the other side of a computer screen? So I started looking into other opportunities, which I got involved with the Google education groups. So I created one for Colorado. That's where I was from. And I decided to start doing free professional development for Colorado educators. That kind of spiraled into something bigger than I had anticipated it to be. And so people from Flip were coming to these podcasts. Not I'm on a podcast, but onto these professional development events. And then I had people like Pear Deck that were saying yes, because everyone was wanting to get into that space of teaching teachers about their tools. And then I got hooked up with Global GEG, which was the Google education group that was known globally. We did a Google education suite, I don't know what it was, but we just decided to teach everyone about Google tools, and it got huge. It was like 5,000 people from all across the world on live with us. And it was like, wow, this is really cool. And so I ended up really tapping into that space of working with educators, community, and then got picked up by Pear Deck. during the pandemic to start working with them. So started in elementary, moved it all up to working with professional development through the pandemic, and then got picked up by this awesome little ed tech company called Pear Deck, which is now Pear Deck Learning and also Go Guardian.
Yeah, so to me, that's like that was one of the, I feel, benefits of the pandemic, if I can say that. Because like my story is similar to that, right? Like I felt like I was able to have opportunities being a more techie person to help teachers, train them, and like somebody in New Zealand saw that. Oh,
Yeah.
cool. And now kind of similar to you, like I'm working at a company in ed tech also supporting teachers, right? So I think that was kind of like, a benefit for some, right? Where like we got that we were able to shine, and,
Yeah.
and as a result, able to like support a bigger audience, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, that's powerful. I want to go back to like the professional development stuff though. Uh,
Yeah. Mhm.
I think there is like this negative connotation um, around PD, right?
Mhm.
A lot of teachers out there. And part of me, I feel, is there isn't enough high impact, high quality PD,
Yeah.
generally speaking, and over the course of time. So what was your kind of your success with PD, even in a virtual environment, like for those that are maybe in the instructional coach kind of role or leadership role, what what could they do? Where could they lean to provide good quality PD for their teachers?
Yeah, and I think that it wasn't so much for me, like, let's have PD to have PD, because I think that's what was happening is like, let's provide them with this PD because they know they need it. And I went to a lot of different conferences and a lot of different events when I was a teacher, being that I worked at a STEM school. So I had the opportunity to go to a lot of things like, I don't know if you remember the ed tech team, but they usually had these like things that were regional events, and you can go to them and
Mm.
you could learn about all these different things, and they were very like innovative, and these people that were teaching about it were local educators and people that were in the area, and they had this really amazing way of being able to utilize a tool or be able to use Google Slides in a tabbed format, like just different things that I had never seen of. And so the thing was is I was like, I'm not going to just teach them professional development, I'm going to lean into some of these conferences and these people that I've seen that are doing innovative things, because that's going to help you learn, not be able to give you something where you're like, yeah, I've seen that for the last 5 years, I don't want to learn that now. It's like, how is this going to make your teaching easier? How is this going to make this a whole lot more robust for your students or engaging for your audience? And so I leaned into those, and I literally just went on the internet, like just reached out to people. I reached out to like this girl named Becky Shorey that was like working for doing the ed tech team stuff. George Barcinas that I saw at one of the ed tech team events. I reached out to Ann Cosma from Flip and just on Twitter and said, hey, you don't know me, but I think you would be really great. So
I
I
love
just,
that.
I do too. Like, I think that leaning into that ability to see that there was really innovative things happening, and professional development didn't have to be just any old tool that you've been using for years and just deciding to teach you about it now. It's like, how are we making things more innovative and engaging for students? Because as you know, in this pandemic learning, kids are not engaged. There was not the ability to get a student on your screen and engage. It's like, let's build some, web quests. Let's do some things. We're doing escape rooms online. Let's talk about how we can do videos with Flip and get kids to, engage that way. So I leaned into what I saw and what I knew from conferences to have really targeted professional development on tools that I knew teachers loved, things that they were excited about, and ways to engage an audience rather than just like, here's how you use Google Docs.
Yeah, no, that's certainly true, and that's something that I try to do like daily, right? Is learn who is receiving, who's the end user
Yeah,
for the PD, right? And what exactly do they need? Like what problems do they face? And
right.
really, meet them where they're at. And sometimes that involves technology and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, this whole concept of high tech, high tech, low tech, no tech,
Yeah.
kind of thinking and kind of approach. So I really appreciate that.
Mhm.
So Amber, like you're in the ed tech space. I see in your title you're a manager, customer marketing,
Yeah.
just like some phenomenal things that you're doing with your company. What what are you doing to, engage with those teachers on the regular? What are you doing to engage with leaders? Because it's sometimes in ed tech, it kind of reminds me of the classroom in the sense that it's easy to just box yourself in.
Right.
And so how are you reaching out? Like you and I connected at Q.
Yeah.
What are the amazing ways that you're supporting teachers at these events and in these spaces?
Yeah, so my title looks scary, like manager of customer marketing. It's like, oh, I must be way out of touch, but I definitely am not. I have a really unique position at my current job, and I started as a product trainer just for the Pear Deck side, and then
Mm.
we got acquired by GoGuardian, and so I work for that bigger space now. But I literally had the ability to connect with educators every single day. So I build out a coach program, which is basically brand ambassadors of our tools. I started out very small with just Pear Deck people and Pear Deck users and things that people that were excited about just Pear Deck. And then it kind of moved into the rest of the tools. But I spent time really leaning into influencers online, teachers that I knew, the people that I met through the pandemic, and said, hey, come join me. Let me teach you about a really cool tool. I'll give you access to it to be able to learn and find for yourself if you like it. And so I really built connections through my coaches program, and I continue to do that. So I had, I think, 350 educators that were they were long standing. They had been with the Pear Deck coaches program for a while. I took it over from another girl. And I've now grown my community to over 1,000 educators that are now in my community to be able to connect with them. We have a dedicated Slack space where they all come in and we get to talk about different things. We have monthly newsletters that we send out. We have things that they're able to go to, like holiday parties that we have for them online. We do dueling piano events we held one time. So I really leaned into being able to still have that connection with educators, because I think it's super important, especially in ed tech, is if you're not hearing the voice of an educator, if you're not knowing what's happening in a classroom, then you're not relevant to what they're doing. And
Mm.
so I spent a lot of time making connections, building those times. And that's exactly why you meet me at these events, is because I spend time going there to meet with coaches, present, be able to have the opportunity to talk to people about it. But it's not because I work for the company. It's because I do love it. I used Pear Deck as an educator before I even joined the company and knew the value of the tool. And so I speak to people as an educator, and I work with them as an educator, not a professional in the ed tech space. And so every single day I'm working with educators. I was just, responding to some emails, some educators telling me about what they did over their summer and telling me about what they're working on. I just made a Padlet, that I was like, tell me about what you guys are doing, how many years you're in education. So I get to still engage with them daily and through my coach programs, and be able to have the ability to still have that connection within the actual classroom through this unique opportunity that I get to, which is community building.
Yeah, and like to me, that there's no difference between what you're describing
Mhm.
and when we were still in the classroom, right?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it came down to just those relationships that we were
Mhm.
building with students, and now we get to build them with anyone, right?
I can't.
With teachers, leaders, sometimes superintendents, right? And that's what's
Yep.
really powerful, hearing the different vantage points
Yeah.
of, because that's where I learned the most. Where like I didn't go into admin, I wasn't admin at all.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but now like kind of hearing like what they're seeing in education, I'm like, there's a lot of learning that took place with me personally, which was huge. I'd like to go back, Amber, and kind of go back to the STEM part of
Yeah.
your journey.
Yeah.
Because that was
Best times of my career.
yeah, like so, and because you said you were medical, or you studied medical.
Yeah, I was going into the medical field when I first started into like college and was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go into, physical therapy. This is where the money's at, healthcare. And then I was like, yeah, exactly. And then I was going to a school just to do a work study. And I was like, oh my gosh, these kids are so fun and it's so cute. Like maybe this is my calling. And so I switched my major. I lost classes. I went for an extra year to college because of it, but I knew it was my calling. And so I ended up going to be an educator. And then I got a unique opportunity, which is kind of funny. I guess when you're somebody that's in technology, you kind of always are in technology. Like you've probably always been dabbling in it. If you were in technology, you've always kind of thought about it, worked on it. Like I used to have those vis-a-vis markers, where you're writing on the overhead. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way. So I was spending time then, okay, I can use PowerPoints and I can build them to be able to showcase vocabulary words for students, before people were actually using laptops in their classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm older than I look. And so the ability to really start using technology, I started being known in my school because when I first started at my school, we had a chalkboard. We didn't even have whiteboards. Okay. So I was known at my school for the lady that was tech savvy at the time. And so I was building PowerPoints. I was figuring out ways to be able to make it more engaging, like, images, graphics, things for students to be able to interact with online. And so I didn't have any technology like certifications or experience. I was just doing it in my classroom. But I had a teacher one day say, hey, we're going to be hiring at this school a technology interventionist, and it's at a STEM school where you're going to be able to work with the teachers and the students on their technology. And I was like, I think that you'd be a great fit. And I said, I don't have any technology experience. I just dabble in it in my classroom. And she's like, no, I think you would be really great at it. And so it was just a unique opportunity that I was able to get. And I started working in a STEM school, which if you ever get to do STEM or work in a STEM school, it is by far the coolest thing you could ever do because there's so much cool stuff that the kids are doing. Project-based learning is underrated, honestly. That is it's so innovative and the kids have a different way of thinking. I remember running a program after school called Engineering is Elementary, and it was through the Boston Museum of Science that we had this curriculum, and we were building bubble wands. That was like part of it. Like, okay, we have to build this bubble wand and we have to make it so that it makes large ones and it has to be, it has all these qualifications on what you need to make in your bubble wand. And the things that these kids could make with cardboard plastic tubes. And I was like, I don't even know how that came out of your head. So to see like kids be able to have that spark of creativity when you're doing project-based learning through STEM is just like the coolest thing I've ever seen. So, and I also had a STEM lab. So then we had, VR goggles. So build background. I didn't realize how many students had never seen the ocean, didn't even know where it was, never visited the ocean. And so I lived in Colorado at the time. So we're landlocked, not many people are getting out to the ocean. And so I realized like you're providing opportunities that they had never had. They didn't know what the ocean looked like. They didn't know what lived in the ocean. They'd never been there. And so it was just really cool to have that opportunity at a STEM school and the technology to go with it.
I really love that you mentioned the whole part about the ocean, right? Because sometimes, at least I'm speaking for myself, like I would often forget, like, wait, most of my students, they don't all get the opportunity to travel, right? Like they come from families that they just don't travel, right? Like for whatever
have
reason.
The opportunity. Yeah.
Or have the opportunity, right? And so like having those kinds of like what you're explaining, like those immersive experiences,
right?
That's super special for some of them. And just knowing that spatial awareness and that context of what else is out there. And to me, that's super special. We do, Amber, you and I both share that passion and that love for project-based learning. And kind of the way you described it with like, the creativity and I like the way I put it, like really early on when I was started getting into PBL, I was like, wait, this is like deeper and wider, right?
Yes.
Where like it's not just memorizing some things for unit tests, but they're getting deeper into the mastery, into the understanding of why things are. And then also wider in the sense that they're using that inquiry to go as wide as they can to reach the things that maybe like are not in that box curriculum that we find in these textbooks, right? And I just have this memory, and I may have shared this on the show before, but
Mhm.
I just remember going through uh, I did a whole semester long design thinking project
Yeah. Mhm.
that I used to do.
Yep.
And I just remember this, I just have this memory of this one student. She just looked up at me in the middle of that chaos, in the middle of that fun, and she's
Mhm.
like, "Wait, Martinez, why isn't this just how school is?" And that's powerful, like for a kid, for a
Yeah,
student to say that, be like, "Wait, like if that's not student buy-in, I don't know what is," right? Um,
exactly.
and just the underratedness
Uh-huh.
of that approach, and it's not like it's new.
Yeah.
So, like from your experience, from your knowledge of all this, like what what makes it so hard? What makes PBL so like not sticky for a lot of leaders and teachers?
I think that they find it hard to hit all the things to be able to make it into a immersive learning experience. So, I know that students are of course getting the things that they need, and I think it's sometimes hard for people to walk away from a prescripted curriculum and be able to then build it into a project-based learning opportunity. And I think that that's really hard for educators to see that, but also I think in some cases, I mean, it may be that these schools aren't, or these teachers in these certain schools aren't able to really step away from that curriculum because that's, something
Mm,
that they have to be able to meet this, goal. They have to be able to hit this standard. And so it's really hard to do that. It takes a lot of creativity, innovation, thinking to come up with the ways to be able to teach them about algebra through project-based learning, or how to be able to do something within social studies, and I think that that's the hard part, is like it takes a little more creative thinking, but the amount of engagement and the amount of things that students learn from that experience is something they're never going to forget, and it gives you far better results than a prescriptive curriculum. And I think it's just hard to step outside of that box as an instructional coach. Teachers that have been teaching for a really long time, they were like, this is working for me, I'm going to continue doing this, this is what works for me. And it's hard to get somebody to say, but isn't there something else that can work for you? Like, isn't there something else that you can integrate to make it just as good? And so I think it's really that point of, I don't know, have the time, energy, or effort to think about all of these things. And I can't step away from this curriculum to think about that. So I think that that's what really, and I mean, I'm speaking from experience that I've had. Clearly, there's probably people that are stepping outside of that box, and that's no issue. But I find it hard for people to see that sometimes.
and I think there's also, generally speaking, and
Mhm,
from classrooms I've observed,
mhm.
and the work I've done at the university level, is like sometimes I think we mistake engagement for compliance,
Yeah, yeah.
and where like they're all being compliant, they're
Mhm.
all typing on a keyboard, they're all like,
Yes.
they you know they're being compliant,
Mhm.
they're be they're they're behaved, they're doing all
Yeah,
the things, right?
exactly. Doing the
and and
function.
and, and so like I think like for me, oftentimes as I'm just in the corner observing the classroom, I'm like, so how are we defining engagement, right?
Right,
And like
right.
you might have their attention. So shameless plug, I do
Yeah.
a session like at conferences.
Uh-huh.
It's called you have their attention, now what?
Yep.
And it's because it's like, so like it's almost like we get there, especially our earlier teachers, right? They're
Mhm,
teaching the first year or two,
mhm.
they have their attention, like, oh cool, I they're all listening to me. And it's not a wild room, right? Like they get to that point. But then what? Like what are we doing to really push our learners, push our students, not just in academics, but also as people, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so for me, like engagement was more of that, right? Of
Right.
like, how are they getting their hands dirty? How are
Mhm.
they rolling up their sleeves and really, again, deeper, wider within the content?
Yeah, and also as an instructional coach, when I was teaching teachers about, being able to manage their classrooms and having technology, I had to remind some educators that just because your classroom is loud and kids are talking doesn't mean they're off task. that means that they're probably engaging in something that's exciting to them. Or you got to like look around the room, read your room, right? And be able to see that, are they messing around? Are they not on task? Or are they actually engaging in learning that's exciting? Like, a classroom doesn't have to be silent for it to be, kids that are on task and doing what they're supposed to. It can also be a loud classroom and they're engaging and learning in the same way. So I had to remind teachers of that. And it's sometimes tough. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so chaotic in here. But then I look around and I'm like, but they're actually learning. So it's okay to have a loud classroom then.
Yeah. I do have a funny story about that. Maybe in my last year teaching, I had a sub who we have our substitute teachers. Our substitute teachers, they do want the room to be very quiet.
Right.
But for my classroom, that was virtually almost impossible.
Yeah.
So they're working on their PBL unit. They're and this sub like texts me,
oh God,
very angry, like kind of like, I'm reporting you to your principal. Like your classroom is way out of hand. And I go back the next day and I talk to the kids. I'm like, what happened? Were you bad? Like, were you just, they're like, no, we're just working on our stuff. And I mean, like my kids had the freedom. I had one of those whiteboards that were like, it was on wheels.
Oh yeah.
And that was their whiteboard.
Yep.
Like, for all the ideation, for all the brainstorming, for all the collaboration. And they would get up and I can see how it would look wild. Right.
Yes. Right.
But no, this sub, I don't know who that person was, but they were after me. They were like, what is going on? We're after Martinez.
I feel bad for subs. Like, oh man, good job for you subbing those that do, because it's a tough job some days.
Yeah, no doubt. And so Amber, like we're just touching on all of my passions. It sounds like yours as well. So earlier you mentioned flipped classroom. Big passion of mine. I in grad school I wrote a whole thesis on it. Love it. And so you were mentioning that you were training teachers.
Yeah.
Is that what I heard correctly? So
yeah. So
what was that like?
Yeah, working with teachers with flipped classrooms, I would come in and I was very much, I think when you're an educator in general, you never stop learning, right? You're always learning. There's always something new. There's always a new tool. There's a new thing and you're excited about it. So I'd go and I'd learn about these different things. I'd learn about like, oh, these Google tools, or how you can build these Google escape rooms and through forms, and you can do all these different things. And I started like going into teachers' classrooms and saying, like observing and saying, I have a really cool way that we can do this with technology. And, you can still have your, centers, and you can still have paper, based, learning if you want, but you can still have opportunities to do learning online as well. Because I think that was the thing. When people heard flipped classroom, they thought everything has to be technology in the classroom all at one time, but you also could have centers that were not, so it was like you're flipping your classroom so that you have some of that, not all of that, and you can flip it to all of it sometimes if you want. But I think there's a room for interpretation on that. And a lot of people thought, oh, flipped classroom means I have to use all technology in here, and I'm not ready for the kids to all be on a computer, And so that was also like a point of misconception. And so I would have to go in and say, no, we're going to put one station as a computer station, or one station is where they're working online and doing this. And then the other ones can be something like around the classroom or a paper pencil activity, something of this nature. And so I think it was just really getting people to buy into like, let's just do one thing. Now let's try another. Let's gauge them a different way. And so it was really awesome and really cool to see when you do have people buy into that and be able to have more of that technology in that flipped classroom instead of just paper pencil sitting at their desks, not engaging in that manner, and seeing when you walk into a classroom and those kids are, collaborating online, they're excited about something, they're doing something, that what they wouldn't have done before. It really makes a difference when you can give kids a different modality to learn, because not all kids learn the same, right? They don't sit there writing on a piece of paper and all getting it. Some are auditory learners, some are visual learners. I'm very much a visual learner. Show me a chart, I can memorize and tell you later, but I need to be able to see it. So I think that's the thing, is you're really giving people different opportunities to learn and how they learn.
Yeah. And like for me, the most powerful part of the flip model was, you now have this extra space
Yeah.
in your classroom, right? Which I won't go into it for those that have been listening to my show on a regular basis, because I have talked about that several times now. We're episode 22. But it's one of those things though that like you the extra space you have, you're not lecturing for 50 minutes.
Yep.
Um, you know, you you don't have to use that high tech for that extra space. Like, what is it that you want your kids to be
Hmm.
rehearsing or repeating, or what reps do you need, right? And so
Right.
instead of like funneling all the new information in the room, you now get to do what we used to consider homework ish, right?
Hmm.
Like that practice, that guided practice,
Yeah.
that you know rehearsal, so to speak. You get to do that, but now they get to do that with you right next to them, right?
Yeah,
Instead of
exactly.
sometimes mom, and this is going to be me, like my daughter's 7, instead of having that dad who doesn't know math that well or doesn't remember math that well and is like, right. So like having the teacher there for those kind of moments, to
Mhm.
me was one of the more like powerful parts of the flip model.
Absolutely, because you're getting to have that more autonomy with being able to work with students in groups and different things because you have different stations and things that they can engage in. But I think that it's a very common misconception, and only because I was the same way when I first heard it, is like flipped. Oh, everything is technology in my classroom. You're flipping it to a whole technology classroom, and that's what people think. They really think that it's like all technology. Everything is now technology in here, and they're like, I don't want to do that. I don't think that that's where I'm ready, what I'm ready for. And so I think it's just changing somebody's mindset and understanding what it actually is. I think there's a lot of that though. And in the ed world, there's a lot of people that are like, hear something and they're like, I don't know what that is, or I don't understand that fully, and I'm going to make my own misconceptions about it.
Sure. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Absolutely. And so kind of getting back to, or getting to the title of this episode. um, and so Amber, I know that you're really passionate about helping teachers,
Yeah.
saving that time. So this this idea of work less but teach more.
Hmm.
What are ways that you achieve that? Whether that was either that was you as an educator or you supporting teachers, what are some tips, some guidance on how we can all be saving our time to actually do the things that we're supposed to be doing, that we're meant to do, and that's to teach. What are your time saving kind of strategies that you've used over the years?
So I want to first say loud and clear for everyone in the back is that you don't have to build from scratch all the time. I feel like that is always what teachers are feeling like they need to do. I have to build from scratch. I have to make this deck from scratch. I'm like, no, use what you already have, make a copy of something, be able to tweak it however you want to make it so it's easier for you. I always say that when I'm talking about Pear Deck is that you don't have to build something from scratch to make it Pear Deck. Whatever you already have built, which is probably a lovely collection of slides, you're going to be able to then add interactivity with Pear Deck and make it a whole different lesson. You're going to engage students in a whole different manner because now you're watching them in real time, moving things on the screen or interacting on a website. So I always feel like teachers feel like I have to make something brand new. I have to make a new document, a new slide, a new something. And you don't have to. There is thousands of resources out there on the web and in the Pear Deck Content Orchard, shameless plug, and be able to pull from, make your own, and do something that you can kind of tweak but still have the content. And I don't know if you've seen all of the great AI technology that's happening out there, but there's also tools that are helping build that for you to give you the ability to then teach more and not have to build so much. Because I remember back in the day, I'm like writing out all these plans. I'm like, using paper pencil. And I'm like, why did I do that? It's a waste of my time. And so use what you have, use what other people have. Like, it's not going to be, I think people think, oh, I'm stealing something from someone. No, we're all stealing in education. We're all taking each other's ideas and making them our own. So it's the ability to be able to not be afraid to take that content that's already built, that stuff that you find on the internet, and make it your own, or be able to use a slide deck and just tweak it to add some engagement or things that maybe you're not utilizing. So just don't be afraid to reuse and redo.
Yeah, no, that's true because like you think about it, you know, we you and I both work for two different companies.
Mhm,
What I've seen is like almost all these ed tech companies,
mhm.
they all have a library
Yeah.
of sort,
Mhm,
right? Like they or some way to like get curated things like
mhm,
and the other thing too is like I remember really early on with me attending ISTE
mhm.
was like you see these people present these high quality people that have resources,
Right.
take them and run, don't ask questions.
Why do you think they're sharing them, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so that's and even like places like I almost said Twitter, but places like X.
Yeah,
I know
whatever.
so many people that are yeah, the Twix. Um, I I know so many people that are very local to me, but also not local. They're just
Mhm,
sharing a bunch of stuff, right? They're they're putting that hustle in, but they're trying to support and they might have their own motivations of like maybe,
yeah,
you know, getting hired somewhere or putting that teacher brand out there. And that's fine.
mhm.
But while they're doing it, again, don't ask questions, just take the resources and go. So Amber, I really love that. Like that idea of like not starting from scratch. Um,
Right.
remix as you need. Um,
Yeah. Teachers'
and
lives are already hard, honestly. There's not enough hours in a day in a teacher's life. I know, I know. And so it's like, what could I do to be able to continue building this stuff and making cool assignments, but not doing all the work? Like, let me find out what I can use to help me. I think there's always that opportunity. People are always sharing resources and they're doing it for a reason. So you can use them.
yeah, 100%, 100%. We are approaching that moment in the show, Amber. So this is the question I ask at the end. This
Oh,
show's not a lot of repetitive questions. Like there's only one question really. Um, and so this is the question of like kind of the, you know, the premise of the show of like what's under the hat for you, what is top of mind. You're doing a lot of work, right? So you
yeah.
and I are in similar um, vantage points of
Yeah.
like we see things globally, like we're meeting and talking to a lot of different people.
Right.
So with what you're seeing right now in education, like we're post pandemic, you mentioned AI. By the way, a lot of people talk about AI with this question. So you can do that or you can avoid it. It's entirely up to you. But like
Oh,
what is
man.
what is nerds? Um uh you know, you can't be that kid like looking over the shoulder like, oh, I'm copying that one.
Mm.
Um you could though. So what is something we need to be talking about? What is something that is really like maybe not getting enough attention or something that maybe is keeping you up at night or even something that like, wow, we're thriving right now in this way. What is top of mind for you, Amber?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna talk about AI, just joking. I mean, it is really great. It's making teachers' lives a whole lot easier, I feel like. But I think that I've been really leaning into and really this really has been like keeping up at night and thinking about it more recently is that relationships within the school, relationships within these tech companies and working with, schools is so huge. And I think that there's been a lot of ways that maybe we're stepping back from that and not being so much of a personalized approach, but more of like an AI approach, like a computer, like a we're only here for this one reason. We're not building these relationships and having that human aspect to a lot of things. And I think that that is a really valuable thing. And to be able to have, I think I can't even tell you the power of a personal learning network or of a network of people that you can lean on and that you learn stuff from and that you can engage with and be able to have that kind of personalized interaction. That's something that's going away because of AI. Like there's a lot of just robots and being able to have things that are just going to be over a computer screen or through a chat bot. And I think that we really need to focus on those things, is spending more time building your personal learning networks, getting out and engaging with people, having relationships to be able to then have those connections. I just recently sent out like, an email to all my coaches and was like, let me tell you about my, my recent trips. Let me tell you about my dogs. Let's tell you about these things. Like, I'm a human too. I'm just like you. I may work for a different company, but I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, I'm, a dog lover, I'm all the things. And I want to be able to have people that still can connect with me on that level. I'm not just this, person working for a company. So I really think that that's something I think about a lot, and I find ways to be able to do it in my daily life and through this career, through this job, through my personal relationships, because I think that that's the way of the world. We're going to lose touch of that if we don't continue to start building those relationships and leaning into people in a human aspect.
And that's where when I see technology get used in certain classrooms that I visit, I'm like, what are you doing besides the tool?
Yeah.
So in other words, they'll all be on the computer, but no one's talking with each other. Like, and to me, that's such a, going, if you subscribe to the 4 C's, right? Like, the critical thinking, but the communication, the collaboration, to me, those are the 2 that are always up on top, because it really is important for, those relationships to exist between teacher and students, but then from student to student, like, how do you communicate? Because after the pandemic, it was really clear. I'm like, oh, you all don't know how to communicate. Okay, cool. No social skills, right? But I kind of love your point though, in the context of ed tech though. Because like we do need to make sure that we foster good relationships with teachers, to individuals like yourself that are there to help, that are there to support, that are human, right? And so being able to provide those PLNs, I think oftentimes teachers are like, oh, I can just do it. I'll do a webinar online, which those are lovely.
Yeah.
My company does those. That's awesome. But I also think like it's okay to get grassroots about it, right? Like
absolutely.
I go to, as a speaker, as a learner, I go to conferences that are in my backyard because I get to network with other humans, and it's on the cheap. I ain't flying anywhere, right? And it's like, and like for like a lot of teachers, sometimes that's what the issue is. Like, my school can't send me to an ISTE, right? Or even like if you're in California, even a Q sometimes is a stretch, because I don't know if you know this, but California is huge. Like going from top to bottom, it's like going across 3-4 states. And so like, like being able to like build those relationships still in a face-to-face environment in an authentic way, is super valuable. And it is a part of the learning process.
Yeah, it goes a long way. And I always used to say that kids don't learn from teachers they don't like. And I mean, in the purest sense, like, if they don't really have a relationship with that teacher, or a relationship with someone, the amount of work that you're going to get out of them, or the authentic, engagement that you're going to get out of them, is going to be minimal, if any. I'm like, they want to be able to have a connection with their teacher. They want to have a connection with you, because they want to be able to then feel like you are, and have their best interest at heart. And I think that that's still the same thing in the world. Like, we still want people to know that we're valuable as humans, not just employees or people that are doing a job. And I'm somebody that's not just an employee. I'm also somebody that's in the world, like a human. And I want people to see that I am that. And so it's just, I think, something that is probably going to be on the back burner with this whole AI technology and things like that, but also something that's hugely important and something that you should look at in your local areas. I mean, I've joined a women in tech and entrepreneurship group in my local area, because it was just a really cool opportunity to meet people in person, because I work from home. I'm sure you probably know this. When you work remotely, you don't get to see people that often. And it's very like, yeah, exactly. It's pretty sad, right? You're like, I stayed in my house all day today. Isn't that great? So I didn't see a single human except for the ones online. And so I don't know. I just find it really beneficial. And this is just a personal story, but I do make these connections with the educators that I work with through my program. And I don't ever make them feel like I am this person that's in a company and I'm bigger, badder, or better than you, because I'm not. I am the exact same person as you. And so I had one reach out to me on my cell phone the other day, and she said, "Hey, we were in our team meeting at our school and we were just talking about you." She's like, "How you're such a, great person at this ed tech company and that you're doing it right." And it literally just like melted my heart. Like, I'm just being me. Like, I'm not doing anything to promote that. I'm just being my authentic self. And so I think that goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the small things, right? Like,
Mhm.
and that whether it's something you give or receive, it's kind of like what you're describing. Um, I won't mention her name because I don't want to embarrass her, but like I did like a podcast, or like it was like a webinar of sort on behalf of my company from a district like on the other side of the country.
Yeah.
But she just sends me like this cute, adorable. I did, if you're curious, if you follow me on Instagram, like I posted it. And so she sent me like this cute little like thank you card, little
Yeah.
Starbucks thing. And it's just like since I've been at Cami, since I've been on the ed tech side of things,
Mhm.
I'm like, oh yeah, I used to get those as a teacher.
Mhm.
It's like
Mhm.
like it, and it's because it's not because people don't want to, and it's because it's not top of mind all the time because we're miles and miles away, right? I think it's the AI, like you mentioned, Amber, but it's
Mhm.
also the way we work now, the way that we can do things.
Right.
While lovely, we can, the fact that like you and I are like,
Yeah.
miles apart, but we can still connect in this way and support people
Right.
in this way.
Right.
It is isolating, right?
Yeah.
And so I
Totally.
think I love that you mentioned this topic for this question because I
Mhm.
don't know if it's been mentioned in this way on the show. So I really appreciate you bringing it up. A+ for Amber.
Yay! See, I didn't go down that road. You told me not to. I switched my perspective.
I'm sorry I influenced that, and I'm probably not supposed to do that. But yeah, like no, I love that part of the conversation though. So folks, I really appreciate all of you, all of you that have been sending the DMs, the likes, all that love to the show and to me. We are coming up towards the end of this season. I think we are topping everything off this season at 24. So 24 episodes. To me, that's a win. I had no idea that I was going to get that many. Appreciate all of you. And so, continue to drop in at Under the Hat Pod. That's up on X. The website itself, underhatpod.com. That's where you find all the things, including this episode here that will drop literally like in 10 minutes because I don't edit. I don't
What?
do any editing. Yeah, like if that was a surprise, like, and people are probably like, "Oh, that's why this is such a sloppy job." Okay, but that will be why, folks. But continue to show support to my friend Amber.
Thank
She
you.
is all over the socials, doing amazing work. Amber Paradek, and just show her that love. If you need to, reach out to her for any questions,
Mhm.
not just her company, but also, just teaching at large, feel free. I'm sure she would appreciate that and welcome
Absolutely.
that. Yeah, so we appreciate everyone here at Under the Hat. And we're going to call it a night because I literally have another meeting coming up because that's my life, working from home,
Oh,
right?
man.
Yeah. So, as always, friends, keep your hats on, but keep your minds open. Appreciate all of you and appreciate you, Amber. Thank you.
Thank you.